I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the CEO of CityBiz, and I'm honored today to interview Ronald Piervincenzi, who is the CEO of US Pharmacopeia. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Evan. It's a pleasure.
Can you provide an introduction to the mission and the vision of USP and how it was structured and funded?
Yeah. So USP was founded in 1820 in the U.S. Senate chamber for the, I would say, simple purpose to improve the quality of medicine in the new United States. Poor quality medicines were coming in from other countries, including from England. They were being kind of dumped on the shores in the U.S., and they were bad medicine, quite literally. And this was a notion to create a set of rules for what should constitute the most basic medicines of the day. That humble beginning is now 201 years ago, and our mission remains the same.
The core aspect of your work is standards, but you also have other programs. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, so those days in 1820 feel like a long time ago. We've grown with medicine, if I can put it, in the simplest way. As our supply of medicine has gotten more plentiful and also more varied, so has USP as an organization, and we have 1,300 staff now today globally. About 2/3 of whom are still in the United States, and about 1/3 are located all around the world. And the programs we have to ensure quality is exactly the same mission, but with all the different kinds of medicine we know, prescription medicines, over-the-counter medicines, dietary supplements, and even in select areas, food ingredients. It takes quite a bit of different kinds of science to put forward to be able to make sure and measure that all those medicines are what they say they are, and they don't contain the impurities or the things that would be dangerous.
So last year, USP celebrated its 200th anniversary. Can you summarize the origins of USP and its impact over 2 centuries?
Yeah. So the founding, which was quite literally on the 1st of January in 1820, was a coming together of 9 physicians. They were physician leaders from the key cities of the day. So Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. And they joined together with a U.S. senator and a couple of essentially House members who were also physicians, all physicians, and formed this one of the first national anything in the United States, and the National Pharmacopeia. It happens to be, interestingly, the first national pharmacopeia in the world. They've all been local before that. In Europe, they've been existing for even up to 2,000 years, going back to Italy, but they'd all been local, nothing national before. And what's most important about that is the idea that everybody in this whole country should be have the same quality medicine, and we shouldn't have different drugs depending on what city we happen to be traveling to. And so that thesis, that idea about the same quality for everyone, we apply now globally. And our standards, USP standards, are used in 150 countries today. And more than 50 of those countries adhere to our standards, like in the US, as the official legal standard in those countries.
So prior to joining USP, your career path included stints at McKinsey and Biogen. Tell us about your career and the decision to join USP.
Yeah, my path to McKinsey, which is a management consulting firm, I was actually a scientist and a laboratory scientist. My PhD was in biomedical engineering, and I was, at the end of my graduate program, I was craving something in the business sector, just learning more about the business sector. And McKinsey was hiring. About half their hires were not business people, and I thought that was interesting, fascinating even. So I took a dip, and I ended up loving it. I was there about 12 years, and I had a huge breadth of experience in dozens of countries, working in the pharmaceutical and the biotech industry, working for the federal government, including with the FDA. And that exposure and that work around R&D and all the issues gave me this broad view that was just amazing. And then after a brief time at Biogen, which was a wonderful opportunity, cut short only by the opportunity for the leadership role at USP in 2014.
And so you were appointed CEO, as I said, in 2014. Can you provide some milestones during your stewardship?
Yeah, but upon my arrival, the first thing I was focusing on was USP's interaction with the world outside USP. Well, in our terms, we call them stakeholders because it's a complex mix of industry, mostly the pharmaceutical industry, government, especially regulatory authorities in the U.S. and abroad, and practitioners, which is our fancy term for doctors and pharmacists. And because we work with all so many, and that is a very big group of what we call stakeholders, the focus there was to listen more. And as a standard setting organization, one can, if you're not careful, can slip into being the teller rather than the listener. And so that was a big transition for the organization. For a couple of years, we focused on listening, learning, and therefore being more effective in setting standards that achieve our goal, and collaboratively creating that. And that was a big milestone for an organization that even then was 195 years old. The next two steps were going global and going digital. So going global we defined it differently than going international. USP had been international since 1990 or so, even in the mid 1980s. But being global is a different way of thinking. It's a different way of using and accessing talent. And so being global means having experts that can be anywhere, that are everywhere. Whereas being international means you're able to send something to another country. And so being global was a mindset shift. It meant opening offices and hiring staff in over 15 countries now, and listening to those experts and informing how we operate. And so today we have dual headquarters in India and the US, where we have laboratory operations, scientific operations, and then we have sites around the world in 5 of the 7 continents. 6 of the 7 continents, actually. No, 5, sorry, not Australia. 5 of the 7 continents, and staff that are there to interact with the same stakeholders, industry, government, and practitioners. And the last is digital, and perhaps maybe we'll talk about that a little later when we look to the future.
So 2020 was, I guess, not only your 200th anniversary, but it was also your mission related to the global medicine supply chain. What vulnerabilities were exposed during the pandemic about the supply chain?
Yeah, we had, this might sound overly simplistic, but it guided us for over a year. 3 parts. The first was the safety of our people, which is our USP employees, of course, and also our expert volunteers, which are a number up to nearly 1,000 that work with us on our science and our standards. And our staff and our volunteers are spread around the world, and ensuring their safety is no small task. It is very much still ongoing. The second was maintaining operations. Again, also sounds obvious or simple, but of course it wasn't in a pandemic. In particular, we can't stop operations, especially in a pandemic. This is the time you need quality medicine more than ever. And making sure that there were no disruptions in our operations was challenging, but also I think really invigorating to our staff to feel they had a positive way to contribute and not just sit back and feel passive about such a terrible pandemic. And then the third was doing what we do, our mission, to ensure quality medicine. And we deployed our efforts in an extensive way for vaccines, including even in the delivery of vaccines, but also in things that in the early days of the pandemic, especially around hand sanitizer. We had other protective PPE and availability of PPE early on. But the notion and the idea that we would be working with beer and spirits companies to produce ethanol that could be used in hand sanitizer was not something we expected coming into 2020, and yet it was very much what we were doing early in the year. And then finally, around the vaccines, our work early is close to what we do, to make sure vaccines are high quality, especially when they're being produced in such a short time frame, that they adhere to standards for sterility, the bread and butter of what we do all the time. But pretty soon, we started spending a lot of time on the delivery. And we partnered with the CDC and became we created a COVID handling toolkit, which was quite literally a set of instructions that were shipped along with the vaccines from the CDC all over the country, and said, here's how to deliver this vaccine safely and how to get the most doses so we can get the most people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And I've never been prouder of the work. Our toolkit got millions of people vaccinated faster. And that saved lives. I mean, quite literally, it saved lives. And it may seem sometimes it's not the most fancy technology that gets the job done. It's practical work that got 1 or 2 more doses out of a vial of Moderna and Pfizer, and that got people safe weeks earlier, and that prevented deaths. So that's really work we're proud of.
And so, what are some of the lessons that you've learned during COVID-19? In the rear, it's hard to think about the rearview mirror being 2020, but yeah, what lessons did you get out of it?
Truly 2. The first was agility, and I mentioned with hand sanitizer as a a good example that we had to move really fast. There was a shortage. But I didn't mention the second phase on the hand sanitizer, there were substandard hand sanitizers that contain methanol, and even applied topically can poison someone, can kill, it can be deadly. And so then we had to quickly create standards to make sure there wasn't methanol in these products, where that had been well controlled before there was a rush of new manufacturing that was making mistakes. So we partnered with the FDA to do that. So the agility means not just to move fast. Moving fast is in some ways easy. Moving fast and doing it well is the hard part. And so agility requires to move fast and then adapt quickly over time to get to that right answer, but not to do it in one big step a year later. We couldn't have afforded that. That was probably the biggest learning. And the second one may seem smaller, but it's how to really think globally. And there's a habit easy, and I happen to live in Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C., and I can say, 70% of adults in Maryland are vaccinated now, and the pandemic was. Well, we have staff in many countries, including in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, and India, where vaccine access is just starting. And in some countries, like in Southern Africa, where it's not started yet, not really. It's not over, the pandemic, not at all. And reminding ourselves to use language that's appropriate for our global audience. And then because of that, the language, of course, doesn't make a difference, but using that language proves to us we need to keep working to get billions more doses available around the world. And that work is underway, and we're proud to be a part of it.
And so beyond the pandemic, what are some of the other current challenges and solutions to these critical issues?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a challenge or an opportunity, but the digitization in healthcare, and in particular for USP, digitization around not just healthcare delivery, but the actual medicines themselves, even in some cases going all the way to true digital medicines that exist only as software programs. Quite remarkable, but there's been multiple of them approved by the FDA. They have the same challenges around quality, but also requiring us to start adapting at a different timeline. It's very exciting, but I think it's a transformation that's coming faster than most people realize, in that it's still talked about as the future, but it's not the future. Like, as I said, there are digital medicines available on an app, looking for my phone here, that approved by the FDA as a prescription medicine. I think that's remarkable, and it's already approved. This is today. It's here now. I think that this is why I think it's more of an opportunity, but to focus us to think about how digital combinations with physical products, medicines, and healthcare delivery, and adapting ourselves to recognize that they have to be done just as well. They have the same challenges around quality and ensuring you get what you think you're going to get is our next curve.
How did the USP get hooked up with you have the Hyderabad Training Institute? Where did that come about, and what role does that play in USP's mission?
Yeah, so there's two reasons we work in India, and they're wonderfully complementary but different. So I go back 15 years, we opened up our first office in India, and we soon after that opened offices in China. We have staff in Brazil, and now it's spread even further. But we targeted the countries where medicines are made. So we're not trying to be too fancy about it. We said, where are medicines made? Well, US and Europe. We have an office in Basel. Where else? India, China, Brazil. Okay, go. Once we got there, we said, we have two jobs to do here. One, we're going to do the same science. Remember, it's not science for India. It's global. Our standards are always global. And we said, we're going to work on those same standards here with scientists here. But also, we have teams dedicated just to engagement in the local community, understanding unique challenges around medicine quality in India, in this example. So we have that team as well. So during the pandemic, not only were we managing operations to keep our laboratory and our laboratory scientists safe and operating, but our local team was engaging with the Indian government and Indian industry to accelerate vaccine delivery and still is, of course, to the population in India. And that is how we learn. And we're learning from that work in India for the expansion now to Southeast Asia and Africa. And we're working there, including in partnership with U.S. government through USAID, to be able to deliver the COVID vaccines. And there's hundreds of millions on the way through COVAX, but billions more are needed. It's a big world, so there's a lot to do. But we can learn from each instance and bring forward those learnings The toolkit we created for the US is now being adapted for other countries, including additional vaccines that aren't even available in the US, that are available in other countries.
How do the local governments adhere to your standards? I'm not part of the process. I don't really understand.
Yeah, so the nuance, I think it'll help clear it up. There's two things that happen. And I'm going to take an example. Let's take Brazil as an example. Just why not? I mentioned it earlier. Two things are happening. First, there are medicines produced in Brazil that are exported to other countries, including the US. So in that case, let's say for the US, the Brazilian industry will follow USP standards, demonstrate that. They'll be approved, and then they'll sell their medicine to the United States and to Mexico, let's say, for example. Reasonable. Mexico will also rely on the USP standard from a medicine made in Brazil, which is interesting then because this never touches the US. Medicine is produced in Brazil, sold to Mexico, but it adheres to the USP standard because that's what Mexico requires for the medicine from Brazil. And that's what I mean when I say that it's required in 50 countries now, except the USP as official standard. Mexico is one of those countries, as is Brazil, actually another. And through that, then, we start to have a broader and broader impact. And we did some little bit of math a couple of years ago, and as of then, it's grown since then. But we estimated that 2 billion people every year take at least one, mostly much more, medicine based on a USP standard. 2 billion a year, and we shared that internally with our staff. And it was a sort of a quiet moment. It was in a town hall where we had several hundred of our staff together. And it was a quiet moment it was a heavy moment in a way. It's 2 billion people a year. So our 1,000 staff then, went back to work, I think, with a little extra energy that day. Say, okay, let's go. We got some work to do. So something we're really proud of.
So the next question, you could probably spend about an hour to 2 hours answering it, but hopefully it'll be a little shorter. What does the future of medicine look like? And what is USP doing to ensure quality and foster trust?
I actually think this is actually a pretty simple answer. It's personalization. The future of medicine is personalization. So it's also the current, but largely the future. And I mean it in two ways. One is the obvious way, which is a truly personalized therapy like gene therapy, which literally exists only for you. But personalization actually can apply even to medicines we already have, but they'll be used, and they will soon be used in different combinations, in different dosages, by measuring other biomarkers. So even medicines that exist today as simple, everyone takes the same, 2 pills in the morning, will start to be adapted and will become personalized. So both it'll be distinctly personalized medicine and medicines that will be delivered in a personalized way. This is all good. However, if you take a Tylenol today, acetaminophen, they're all made under USP standard, and it comes out and you don't care who manufactured it, and it's 200 milligrams, and that's pretty straightforward. We measure the quality, and that's it. If you have a gene therapy which exists for a total of 24 hours and delivered only for you, what is quality? It's different than the next person. It's clearly not the same. So your attributes for how you think of good is really much different. It requires a whole different set of thinking. And yet it becomes even more important because in some ways the personalized medicine of tomorrow is more like the medicine of 1800 than 1990. In 1800, all medicine was personalized. You'd go to the doctor would take, grind up some herbs and mix some things in there. Some of it was real, some of it maybe not so much. And, what you got was from this one doctor and maybe nobody else. Or the pharmacist would throw some things together for you and it'd be a little different every time. Well, I don't think that's the case for personalized medicine. It's a bit more scientific than that. But it has some of the same elements of requiring monitoring and measurement of what good looks like from the beginning all the way through to the delivery to the patient, and unique for each patient. So I'm excited about it, but I truly think that is the future and that it's coming pretty quickly, especially with the advent of more measuring technologies. It requires you to have some measurement. Look, so you take a statin to lower your blood pressure, to lower your cholesterol, and how much statin do you take? Well, you can get a test every 6 months and change it. But what if you were being monitored on a daily basis and your doses would go up and down on a daily basis? Sure, that's possible. That would be personalized medicine, but with exactly the same medicine you might be taking for the last 10 years. So just as an example, the future is really close.
And so, what part of the USP story have you not shared with us? Is there something that we've missed?
I think maybe the thing I glossed over a bit is how we do what we do and what it takes. So to cover the medicine supply in the U.S. today, so this is prescription and over-the-counter medicines like Tylenol and Advil, as well as dietary supplements. USP now, the number changes frequently, but it's well over 7,000 different standards. And a standard is a scientific document that describes analytical tests and rules for what a medicine should and shouldn't be, every specific one, including all of its ingredients and rules for how to conduct the tests. Over 7,000. It's a huge amount of scientific information developed over many years, of course, and updated on a regular basis. It's a lot of work, is what it is. It's a lot of work. And so what it empowers, though, good standards like this empowers faster innovation, simply because each new innovation, each new medicine, each new technology does not need to go back to scratch. It doesn't have to reinvent all the processes. It can start off to say, I know how to ensure sterility. I know exactly what type of excipients I can use as my ingredients in the drug, et cetera, and then I can go right to my innovation. And so good standards speed innovation, and we've seen that in the pandemic. I mean, we see it all the time, but we've seen it in the pandemic, and we even begun to measure it through our own measures to make sure that we're doing the right work. And so ultimately, the future of more complexity, more specialization, a really solid standard base will actually enable that specialization to occur in a way that's safe and effective. And I think that's why I'm so excited about what the next chapter is for USP.
Well, Ron, I really want to thank you for sharing your background and the important and significant role that USP plays in our global medical food chain. So it's an important story, and thanks for sharing.